The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted only by distant stars and swirling nebulas. The UEN Pathfinder, a sleek and powerful human exploration vessel, drifted silently through the void. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. A new planet had appeared on their scanners, one that was not marked on any star maps. Orvani Prime, murmured Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, the ship's science officer. A dead world, sir. No signs of advanced technology, but there are faint life readings deep underground. Carter frowned. The Pathfinder was on a routine survey mission, searching for habitable worlds and lost relics of ancient civilizations. They had encountered abandoned planets before, but none that still had living beings hiding beneath the surface. "Prepare an away team," Carter ordered. "We're going down there." The descent. The shuttle cut through the planet's thick, dusty atmosphere, its engines humming as it approached the surface. Below, Orvani Prime was a graveyard of a once great civilization. Towering structures, now nothing more than skeletal ruins, jutted out from the cracked earth. The air was thin, laced with traces of decay and time. As the shuttle touched down, Captain Carter, Lieutenant Monroe, and 3 other crew members stepped out, their boots crunching against the dry, barren ground. The sky above was a dull gray, and an eerie silence hung in the air. "This place is unsettling," muttered Ensign Patel, gripping his scanner tightly, like something wiped out everything and left it to rot. Monroe's device beeped. "I'm picking up life signs beneath us. There's an entrance to an underground structure about 500 meters west." The team moved cautiously, stepping over broken debris and shattered statues of unknown figures. They reached what looked like an ancient elevator shaft, half buried in the dirt. A large, rusted panel beside it flickered weakly with blue light. Carter pressed a button on his wrist communicator. "Pathfinder, we found an access point. We're heading inside." The hidden sanctuary. The descent was slow and tense. The ancient lift groaned and shook as it carried them deeper underground. The air became cooler, and a faint blue glow illuminated the tunnel walls. As they stepped off at the bottom, they found themselves in a vast underground chamber. Unlike the ruins above, this place was still intact. Strange symbols and markings lined the walls, pulsating faintly. Then they saw them. Huddled together in small groups, weak and frail, were the last survivors of the Orvani race. Their skin was a pale blue, their eyes large and filled with exhaustion. They wore tattered robes, their bodies thin from years of struggle. When they saw the humans, some flinched in fear, others stared in silent curiosity. One of them, an elderly figure with a long silver crest atop his head, stepped forward. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You are not of this world." Carter took a careful step forward, keeping his hands visible. "No, we're not. We're from a planet called Earth. We found your world by accident." The old Orvani studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I am Velaris, last of the Orvani Council. We thought we were forgotten. A dying race." As the humans walked deeper into the sanctuary, they saw the true state of the Orvani people. There were children, but not many. The elderly outnumbered the young. The population was too small to sustain itself for much longer. Their supplies were dwindling, and their air purification systems were failing. "We were once a proud and powerful people," Velaris said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Our cities touched the stars. Our knowledge was vast. But it all ended long ago. A great calamity struck us, one we could not escape. The surface became unlivable, and only a few of us managed to survive underground. But even here, time is against us." Carter exchanged glances with Monroe. The Orvani were on the verge of extinction. Without help, their fate was sealed. Monroe's scanner beeped urgently. She checked the readings and looked up, her expression grim. "Sir, this planet won't last much longer. Seismic activity is increasing. The core is unstable. If we don't get them out of here, they won't survive the next few decades." Carter turned back to Velaris, his decision already made. You're not forgotten, Velaris. Humanity doesn't turn its back on those in need. We'll help you. The old Orvani's eyes widened, hope flickering within them for the first time in centuries. And so, on a dead world that had been lost to time, a new chapter began. The last survivors of an ancient race had found their saviors in humanity's care. Captain Elias Carter stood in the underground chamber of Orvani Prime, surrounded by the last remnants of a once great civilization. The Orvani people, weak and frail, watched the humans with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Their leader, Velaris, had spoken of their tragic past, how their civilization had crumbled, and how they had been forced to live in hiding for centuries. Carter felt a deep sense of responsibility. Humanity had found these people, and now they could not turn away. We need to get them off this planet, he murmured to Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, who was scanning the underground structure with her advanced equipment. Monroe nodded, her face serious. Captain, I've analyzed their habitat. Their air purification system is barely functioning. The food supply is running out. If we don't act fast, they won't survive much longer. Carter turned to Velaris. How many of your people are left? Velaris let out a heavy sigh. Less than 10,000. Once, we were billions. Now, we are only ghosts of the past. Carter clenched his jaw. The Orvani were on the edge of extinction, but humanity would not let that happen. A difficult choice. Back on the Pathfinder, Carter held a meeting with his officers. The situation was clear. The Orvani needed to be evacuated, but it wouldn't be easy. Commander Darius Holt, the ship's second-in-command, frowned as he studied the holographic display of Orvani Prime. Captain, moving an entire species isn't a simple task. We don't have enough ships to transport them all at once. Carter leaned forward. Then we'll do it in phases. First, we take the sick and elderly to one of our colony worlds. Once we secure more resources, we bring the rest. Lieutenant Monroe added, there's another problem. Not all Orvani trust us. Some are afraid of what leaving this planet will mean. Carter understood. The Orvani had lived in isolation for centuries. To suddenly leave their home, even a dying one, would be terrifying. But staying meant death. We have to earn their trust, Carter said. We're not here to conquer them. We're here to save them. Resistance from within. The next day, Carter and his team returned to the underground city to discuss the plan with the Orvani leaders. Velaris listened carefully, but when Carter finished speaking, another Orvani stepped forward. This Orvani was younger, with sharp features and piercing yellow eyes. You ask us to trust you, but how do we know you won't abandon us once we leave our home? He challenged. Velaris introduced him. This is Callan. He speaks for those who fear change. Carter met Callan's gaze. I understand your fear, but your people won't survive here. If we don't act, this world will become your grave. Callan's expression hardened. And what if we leave, only to become beggars in your world? What if we lose the last pieces of who we are? Carter took a deep breath. I won't let that happen. Humanity doesn't abandon those in need. You will not be beggars. You will be survivors, and together, we will rebuild your future. Callan studied him for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Velaris sighed. He is not ungrateful, Captain. He is afraid. But fear can turn into trust, if given time. Carter nodded. He just hoped they had enough time. The first evacuation. 3 days later, the first transport ships arrived. The operation had to be swift. The unstable core of Orvani Prime was making the planet more dangerous each day. The sick and elderly were the first to board. Human medics assisted the weakest Orvani, offering food and medical care. Many of them had never seen so much kindness before. Carter walked through the boarding area, making sure everything was going smoothly. He spotted a small Orvani child clutching his mother's hand, eyes wide with fear. The mother looked uncertain, torn between staying and leaving. Carter knelt down to the child's level. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "You're going to a place where you'll be safe. A new home." The child looked up at his mother. Slowly, she nodded and stepped forward. One by one, the Orvani boarded the ships. Some still hesitated, unsure of what awaited them. Others, especially the younger ones, looked forward with hope. Kalen stood at a distance, watching. He had refused to board, staying behind with those who still did not trust the humans. "You still don't believe we're here to help?" Carter asked as he approached. Kalen crossed his arms. "I don't believe in promises. I believe in actions. If you truly care about us, prove it." Carter extended a hand. "Come with us and see for yourself." Kalen hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet." Carter respected his decision. "Then I'll be back. And when I return, I hope you'll be ready." A new beginning. As the first group of Orvani left their dying world, Carter watched from the command deck of the Pathfinder. It was only the beginning. There were still thousands left on Orvani Prime, and time was running out. But humanity had made a promise, and Carter intended to keep it. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder, watching as the first transport ships carrying Orvani refugees disappeared into the vastness of space. The evacuation had begun, but there was still much to do. Thousands of Orvani remained on their dying planet, hesitant and afraid. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe approached, her expression tense. "Sir, we have a problem. A transmission just came in from Earth. Some of the United Earth Nations leaders are questioning our mission. They believe we are taking too many risks by helping the Orvani." Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. He had expected this. Politicians rarely supported decisions that didn't bring immediate benefits. "What's their main concern?" Monroe glanced at her datavat. "They're worried about resources. They say we can't afford to take in an entire alien race. Some believe the Orvani could become a burden or even a future threat." Carter clenched his fists. A future threat. They're barely surviving. He turned to the communications officer. "Patch me through to the council. I'll talk to them myself." A divided council. Minutes later, Carter's face appeared on the screen in the United Earth Nations High Council chamber. Several high-ranking officials looked at him, their expressions serious. One of them, Councillor Harding, spoke first. "Captain Carter, we commend your efforts, but we need to be realistic. Humanity has its own struggles. Taking in an entire alien species is a massive responsibility. How do you propose we handle this without endangering our own people?" Carter took a deep breath. "Counselor, I understand your concerns, but this is not just about resources. This is about who we are as a species. The Orvani are on the edge of extinction. If we turn our backs on them now, we're no better than the dangers that wiped them out." Another council member, Councillor Shen, leaned forward. "We are not saying to abandon them, but there must be limits. How many can we realistically support? What if their presence causes unrest in our colonies?" Carter's voice was firm. "We take it step by step. We integrate them into our society, help them rebuild. They are intelligent and skilled. Given time, they will contribute, not burden us. But if we do nothing, we let an entire species fade from existence. That is not the legacy humanity should leave behind." There was a long silence. Finally, Harding sighed. "Very well, Captain. We will continue supporting your mission, for now. But we expect progress reports. Do not let this become a mistake we cannot afford." Carter nodded. "You have my word." The Orvani's doubts. Back on Orvani Prime, the situation was just as difficult. While some Orvani had agreed to leave, many still refused. Kalen, one of their strongest voices, remained skeptical of the humans' intentions. Carter met with him in the underground chamber, where several Orvani gathered around. "Why do you resist, Kalen? You saw the first group leave safely. What more do you need to believe we are here to help?" Kalen's yellow eyes burned with doubt. "You humans say many things, but words are easy. What happens when you grow tired of us? What if you decide we are not worth saving anymore? Velaris, the elderly Orvani leader, placed a hand on Callan's shoulder. Callan, I understand your fear, but what choice do we have? Our world is crumbling. Callan shook his head. If we leave, we lose everything. Our culture, our history, our identity. How do we know we won't just fade into nothing, swallowed by a foreign world that is not ours? Carter thought for a moment, then spoke. Your people won't vanish. Your history, your traditions, those things don't disappear just because you leave a planet behind. You carry them with you. We're not asking you to abandon who you are. We're offering you a chance to survive so that your people can write the next chapter of their story. Callan looked around at the gathered Orvani, seeing the uncertainty in their eyes. He exhaled slowly. If you truly mean what you say, then prove it. Help us restore something of our past before you take us to your world. Show us that we are not just passengers, but a people who still matter. Carter nodded. Then that's what we'll do. A race against time. The Pathfinder crew began working with the Orvani to recover what remained of their history. Engineers helped restore their ancient archives, downloading whatever knowledge and records they could salvage. Some of the humans even worked alongside the Orvani craftsmen to preserve art, relics, and written texts. Despite the urgency of the evacuation, this effort helped ease the fears of many Orvani. They saw that the humans were not just rescuers but allies who respected their identity. Callan watched the humans work, his doubts slowly shifting. Maybe, just maybe, the humans were telling the truth. But just as things seemed to be improving, an alarm echoed through the underground chambers. Monroe's voice came urgently through Carter's communicator. Sir, we have a problem. Long-range scanners just picked up an unidentified fleet entering the system. Carter's eyes narrowed. Unknown fleet. Who are they? Monroe's voice was tense. We don't know yet, but they're coming straight for Orvani Prime, and they're not answering any of our hails. Carter's stomach tightened. Humanity had come to save the Orvani, but now, it seemed, someone else had arrived, and their intentions were unknown. The alarm blared through the corridors of the Pathfinder, sending a wave of urgency through the crew. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, his jaw tight as he stared at the holographic display. A fleet of unidentified ships was approaching Orvani Prime, and they weren't responding to any hails. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe's hands flew over the controls. Sir, they'll enter orbit in 5 minutes. No identification codes, no response to our messages. Their formation suggests a military presence. Commander Darius Holt's expression darkened. Could be raiders. If they know the Orvani are weak, they might be here to scavenge what's left. Carter's voice was firm. Raise shields. Bring weapons online, but don't fire unless provoked. Get the Orvani leaders up here. We need to know if they recognize these ships. Minutes later, Velaris and Callan arrived on the bridge. The old Orvani leader looked at the display, his eyes widening in shock. No, it cannot be. Callan's fists clenched. The Darakians. Carter turned sharply. Who? Velaris took a deep breath. Our oldest enemies. Long ago, they were a lesser power in this region, always envious of our advancements. When our civilization collapsed, they vanished. We thought they were gone. He looked back at the display. But it seems they have returned. Monroe's console beeped. Sir, we're being hailed. On screen. The holographic image flickered to life, revealing a menacing figure. The Darakian commander had rough, dark-scaled skin, piercing red eyes, and a deep, growling voice. I am Warlord Vexer of the Darakian Dominion. Humans, you have no claim to this world. Leave now, and we will allow you to go unharmed. Carter remained calm. We are here on a humanitarian mission. The Orvani are under our protection. Vexer's lip curled in a cruel smile. Protection. How amusing. This world belongs to the strong. The Orvani are relics of a failed empire. We have returned to claim what was once denied to us. Callan stepped forward, fury in his eyes. You abandoned this place when we fell. Now you come to take the bones of our people. We will not submit." Vexor laughed. "You are already dead, Orvani. It is only a matter of time. And these humans," he narrowed his eyes at Carter, "they are foolish to stand in our way." The transmission cut off. Monroe's voice was urgent. "Sir, the Darakian ships are charging weapons." Carter's decision was instant. "Battle stations. Prepare to engage. A fight for survival." The Darakian fleet moved fast. Bright streaks of plasma fire rained down from the lead ships, striking the surface near the Orvani underground city. Explosions shook the ground, sending tremors through the tunnels. On the Pathfinder, Carter gripped his chair as the chute shields absorbed the first wave of enemy fire. "Return fire. Target their weapons." Energy blasts shot from the Pathfinder's cannons, striking the Darakian vessels. One enemy chute shields flared, then collapsed as a direct hit tore through its hull. But the Darakians had numbers. More ships emerged from the darkness, flanking the Pathfinder. The battle turned into a chaotic exchange of fire, with the humans and Orvani fighting against overwhelming odds. Underground chaos. Below, in the underground city, the Orvani panicked as the walls shook from the bombardment. Velaris and the other elders struggled to maintain order. Kalen grabbed a weapon from one of the emergency storage units. "We can't just sit here. We need to fight." A group of young Orvani warriors gathered around him. Though weakened by centuries of hardship, they had not forgotten their pride. "If this is our end," one of them said, "let us face it with honor." Velaris placed a trembling hand on Kalen's shoulder. "This is not our end, my son. Not yet. The humans are fighting for us. We must do the same." Turning the tide. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, Monroe shouted, "Captain, reinforcements incoming." Carter's heart pounded. Ours or theirs? Monroe checked her readings. Ours. The UEN fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. A fleet of human warships appeared in the system, led by the massive battleship UEN Vanguard. The moment they arrived, they unleashed a barrage of fire upon the Darakians. Vexor's fleet, caught off guard, struggled to regroup. One of their cruisers was torn apart by a direct hit from the Vanguard's main cannon. Carter seized the opportunity. "All ships, focus fire on their flagship." The combined firepower of the Pathfinder and the UEN reinforcements overwhelmed the Darakian flagship. It erupted in a massive explosion, sending debris spiraling into space. Seeing their leader destroyed, the remaining Darakian ships hesitated. Within moments, they turned and fled. Victory and resolve. The battle was won, but the damage had been done. The Orvani underground city had suffered severe structural damage. It was no longer safe. Carter stood before Velaris and Kalen. "We need to get everyone off-world now. The Darakians will return, and next time, they'll come in greater numbers." Kalen, still gripping his weapon, looked at the destruction around him. For the first time, his expression was not one of doubt, but of determination. "You fought for us," he said. "You bled for us. I was wrong to doubt you, Captain." Velaris nodded solemnly. "Our time on this world has ended. It is time for the Orvani to walk a new path." Carter extended his hand. "Then let's do it together." Kalen grasped it firmly. The last great journey of the Orvani had begun. The skies above Orvani Prime were filled with ships. The evacuation had begun. Human transport vessels and cargo freighters moved in careful formation, descending into the ruined world below. Orvani refugees, carrying only what little remained of their civilization, boarded these ships with a mixture of fear and hope. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder, watching the operation unfold. The Darakian attack had nearly doomed them all, but with the help of the UEN fleet, humanity had bought the Orvani a second chance. Now they had to make sure they got off this planet before the enemy returned. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe checked her console. "Sir, we've successfully evacuated over 60% of the Orvani population. But we're running into problems. Some of the transports are overloaded, and a few Orvani still refuse to leave." Carter frowned. Who's refusing? Monroe tapped a few commands, bringing up a list. A group of elders and historians. They say they won't leave without securing the last remnants of their history. Carter sighed. They don't have time for that. The Darakians could return at any moment. Commander Darius Holt crossed his arms. If we force them, we might break their trust. They already lost their home. If we take away their past too, they might never forgive us. Carter thought for a moment. Fine. I'll go down there myself. If they won't listen over the comms, maybe they'll listen in person. A plea for the future. Carter, Monroe, and a small security team took a shuttle down to the surface. The underground city was in ruins, cracked and broken from the Darakian bombardment. Dust and debris filled the air as the last of the Orvani rushed to board the waiting transports. Deep within the ancient halls of the Orvani archives, Carter found the elders. Velaris, the wise leader of the Orvani, was carefully packing delicate scrolls and data storage units into containers. Kalen stood nearby, his face set in determination. We cannot leave without these, he said as Carter approached. They hold the stories of our ancestors, the records of our people. If they are lost, then so are we. Carter knelt beside Velaris, his voice calm but firm. I understand, but we're out of time. The Darakians could be back any moment. If you stay, you'll die here. And then your history dies with you. Velaris looked at him with tired eyes. Captain Carter, you and your people have given us hope. But history is more than just survival. It is memory. It is identity. Carter nodded. Then let's make a deal. We'll take everything we can carry. But you have to come with us. Now. Kalen hesitated, but Velaris placed a hand on his shoulder. He is right, my son. We cannot hold on to the past if it means losing our future. The Orvani elders quickly packed what they could, and Carter signaled for the remaining transports to prepare for departure. The final departure. The last shuttles lifted off, carrying the final group of refugees. From orbit, Carter watched as the planet below faded away. The world of the Orvani, once great and powerful, was now a lifeless ruin. As the ships formed up for their journey to the UN-controlled sectors, Kellen stood beside Carter, staring at the shrinking planet. It feels like a dream, he whispered. As if we are ghosts, leaving behind a world that no longer remembers us. Carter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're not ghosts. You're survivors, and survivors build new worlds. Kalen turned to him, his expression unreadable. You truly believe that? Carter smiled. I know it. A new home. The UN fleet guided the Orvani refugee ships toward a new destination, a habitable planet in a remote sector, unclaimed and untouched. It wasn't the same as Orvani Prime, but it was a chance for a fresh start. As the ships approached the new world, Velaris spoke softly. This place, it is not our home. But perhaps in time, it can become one. Kalen looked at Carter. Will your people stand by us? Or will we be abandoned once we are no longer your problem? Carter met his gaze. Humanity doesn't abandon its allies. We fought for you. We'll help you rebuild. Kalen gave a slow nod. Then perhaps our people still have a future after all. As the first ships began their descent to the planet's surface, Carter exhaled. The hardest part was over. But the real challenge, the rebuilding of an entire civilization, was just beginning. The Orvani ships descended onto their new homeworld, their hulls reflecting the light of an unfamiliar sun. From orbit, the planet appeared lush and green, filled with vast forests and winding rivers. It was nothing like Orvani Prime, but it was a place where they could begin again. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, Captain Elias Carter observed the landing through the main viewport. The hardest part, escaping Orvani Prime, was over. Now they had to help the Orvani rebuild their lives. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe checked the latest reports. Sir, the first groups are setting up temporary camps. UN engineers are assisting with shelter construction, but the Orvani seem hesitant to accept our help. Carter sighed. He had expected this. After all, the Orvani had spent generations surviving on their own. Accepting human aid would not come easily. "Let's go down there," Carter said. "I want to see things for myself." A world of uncertainty. Carter, Monroe, and a team of engineers landed on the surface in a shuttle. The air was fresh, and the ground was soft beneath their boots, a stark contrast to the dry, crumbling land of Orvani Prime. Velaris, the elder leader of the Orvani, greeted them at the edge of the settlement. Around them, Orvani workers carefully unpacked what little remained of their history: artifacts, ancient records, and relics from their ruined civilization. "This world is kind," Velaris said, his voice filled with quiet gratitude. "But kindness does not erase uncertainty. My people fear what comes next." Carter folded his arms. "They don't trust us yet." Velaris gave a small smile. "Trust is earned, Captain. You saved us, but survival is not the same as living. Many Orvani still feel like strangers, even to themselves." Nearby, Kalen supervised a group of Orvani warriors who were setting up defensive positions. Even here, in a safe world, he refused to let his guard down. Carter approached him, expecting trouble. Kalen didn't look up, expecting reality. "The Darakians won't forget us so easily. If they discover we survived, they'll come." Carter respected Kalen's caution, but he also saw the burden in his eyes. The Orvani had lost everything. Even on this peaceful world, fear still gripped them. "You don't have to do this alone," Carter said. "Humanity is here. We stand with you." Kalen finally turned to him. "Words are easy, Captain, but actions define history." Carter nodded. "Then let's make history together." The challenge of unity. Over the next few days, the Orvani settlement slowly took shape. Human engineers helped build homes, water systems, and energy stations. But despite their efforts, tension remained. One evening, a heated argument broke out between an Orvani craftsman and a human technician. The Orvani insisted on building structures in the traditional way, using their old techniques. The human argued that modern technology would be faster and stronger. Kalen watched from a distance, his arms crossed. "Do you see now? We are too different. This will not work." Carter stepped forward and spoke firmly. "No, Kalen. This is exactly why it will work. We are different. But if we stop trying to understand each other, then we fail before we even begin." He turned to the arguing workers. "Listen," he said. "The past is important, but so is the future. Work together. Use both traditions and technology. Find a balance." The Orvani craftsman and the human technician hesitated, then slowly nodded. They returned to their work, this time together. Kalen watched in silence, then spoke quietly. "Perhaps you are right, Captain." A new dawn. Days passed, and progress continued. The first permanent Orvani homes stood proudly under the sky of their new world. Farms were being planted. Schools were being planned. Carter stood atop a small hill, watching the sunset with Velaris. "They're doing it," Carter said. "They're rebuilding." Velaris smiled. "Yes, and for the first time in many generations, we have hope." But even in this moment of peace, Carter knew one truth: the Darakians were still out there. They would return. Humanity had saved the Orvani once. Would they be ready to do it again? The Orvani settlement had grown in just a few weeks. What once was a scattered refugee camp had transformed into a small but thriving colony. Homes stood firm, fields stretched into the horizon, and the air carried the hopeful sounds of people rebuilding their lives. But despite this progress, an uneasy feeling settled over Captain Elias Carter. He stood on a hill overlooking the colony, watching as Orvani and humans worked side by side. They had come so far, but he knew their journey was not over. The Darakians were still out there. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned to see Kalen standing beside him, his gaze fixed on the sky. "You feel it too," Kalen said. Carter nodded. "It's too quiet." Kalen clenched his fists. The Darakians won't forget us. They'll come to finish what they started. Carter exhaled. And we'll be ready for them. The warning. Later that evening, a distress signal came through the Pathfinder's communications array. Monroe quickly decoded it. Sir, it's from one of our long-range scout ships. They detected multiple Darakian vessels heading in this direction. Carter's face hardened. How long until they arrive? Monroe hesitated. Less than a day. Callan, who had been standing nearby, cursed under his breath. They found us. Carter immediately took command. Get every available ship in the air. Prepare the colony's defenses. We won't let them take this world. The battle begins. The next day, dark shadows filled the sky as the Darakian fleet arrived. Their warships descended upon the colony, weapons primed. A transmission came through. Warlord Vexor's face appeared on the screen, his red eyes burning with cruel satisfaction. You should have left them to die, human, he sneered. Now you will die with them. Carter's response was calm and steady. You made one mistake, Vexor. And what is that? Carter leaned forward. You underestimated us. With a single command, the battle erupted. The Pathfinder and the UEN fleet opened fire, their energy cannons lighting up the sky. The Orvani, though fewer in number, fought alongside them, using their knowledge of terrain and tactics to strike back at the enemy. Kalen led a team on the ground, moving through the colony's defenses, directing fire, and keeping civilians safe. For the first time in his life, he was not just fighting for survival, he was fighting for a future. A turning point. The battle was brutal. The Darakians outnumbered them, their ships larger and stronger, but humanity had fought worse odds before. They used strategy, precision, and teamwork to strike at weak points in the enemy fleet. Monroe's voice rang out. Sir, we've damaged their flagship, but they're still operational. Carter made a quick decision. Then we take them out from the inside. Prepare a strike team. Kalen stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Carter met his gaze. Let's finish this together. The final strike. Carter, Kalen, and a small team infiltrated the Darakian flagship through a breach in its hull. Fighting through corridors filled with enemy soldiers, they pushed toward the control center. Vexor waited for them. You dare stand against me, he growled, drawing his weapon. Kalen stepped forward. We don't stand alone. We stand together. The battle was fierce, but in the end, Carter and Kalen stood victorious. With a final strike, the Darakian flagship was disabled. As they escaped, the UEN fleet fired the finishing blow. The flagship exploded, and the remaining Darakian forces retreated. A new dawn. The battle was won. As the sun rose over the Orvani colony, Carter and Kalen stood side by side. You were right, Kalen said quietly. Survivors don't just live. They rebuild. Carter smiled. And we'll keep rebuilding. Together. For the first time in generations, the Orvani had more than just survival. They had hope. And with humanity by their side, they had a future.